At 81, Mick Jagger is finally naming truths he kept quiet for decades. The world knows him as the tireless frontman, the figure who commanded every stage, but that image came with a cost he rarely addressed. These are the parts of his story he avoided while the spotlight was on him, the choices that shaped the man behind the myth. For years, he hid doubt, strain, and regret to keep the machine moving. Now he is willing to look back without disguise. Today we reveal 6 confessions that reveal what that life truly demanded, and the final one reframes everything fans believed they knew. Number 6. He regrets the way he treated some bandmates during the early years. Mick Jagger has always been the face most people associate with the Rolling Stones. The voice and the movement that seemed to pull the whole band with him. From the outside, he looked like the natural leader who kept the machine running. Inside, it was not that simple. He could be sharp, controlling, and quick to push someone aside if he believed the band's progress was at risk. That edge was felt most clearly in the story of Brian Jones, the founding member whose fall from influence slid into isolation, removal from the band, and only weeks later, his death. In later interviews, Jagger admitted that he and the others picked on him and that he behaved in a very childish way toward Jones. Fame at that level leaves little room for careful emotional choices. Rivalries grew under pressure, loyalties shifted with mood, workload, and the exhaustion of life on the road. What looked like a smooth, unstoppable band was, behind the scenes, a group of young men trying to navigate fame without guidance. Jagger's regret comes from seeing how those early years rewarded the wrong instincts. Protect the brand, move quickly, ignore whatever slows the momentum. The result was a kind of casual cruelty that did not feel cruel at the time. The downfall of Brian Jones did not unfold on stage or in boardrooms. It played out in hotel rooms filled with tension, in studio sessions where silence grew heavy, and on tour buses where jokes turned sharp. By the late 1960s, Jones was unreliable and overwhelmed, and instead of reaching for patience, the group stepped back. Meetings became confrontations. Decisions that needed care were rushed because everyone feared losing ground. When the band finally told Jones he had to go, the language was businesslike, the kind that lets people pretend it is not personal. Then came his death, and the story changed for everyone, including Jagger. Publicly, he grew quiet. Privately, he admitted the group's treatment of Jones had been cold and unfair. He pointed inward, calling his own behavior childish and acknowledging that the band had failed someone who had helped build their foundation. Realizing the harm done to a friend can weigh heavily, but what happens when that weight begins to reshape your sense of the future? Jagger faced a choice that could have ended the Rolling Stones entirely. Number 5. He considered quitting the Rolling Stones in the 1980s. There is a common belief that legendary bands stay steady forever, that the connection that created them keeps them glued together no matter what. In the 1980s, Mick Jagger learned how fragile that belief really was. He reached a point where the future of the Rolling Stones did not feel guaranteed, even to him. On the outside, the band still looked unstoppable. Inside, he was dealing with frustration, creative boredom, and a partnership with Keith Richards that no longer felt natural. The clashes were not only emotional, they shaped the group's direction. During that decade, Jagger thought seriously about whether he should stay or walk away. His rise had been fast and demanding. Through the 70s, he helped guide the Stones through chaos, reinvention, and some of their biggest achievements. But the 80s brought a different strain. Relationships inside the band shifted. Everyone was pulled in separate directions. Solo projects took priority, and business decisions started to shape their days more than creative energy. When Jagger released She's the Boss and other solo work, it was not a side project. It signaled that he had interests beyond the Stones. Richards began following his own path too. These choices showed that both men were preparing for the possibility of separate futures. Under those conditions, the idea of leaving was not a passing thought. It was something he weighed carefully. The most revealing moments from that era were not public arguments, but quiet changes. The subtle way collaboration slipped into distance. When Richards formed the Expensive Winos and Jagger poured himself into solo music, the long nights they once spent working side by side were replaced by brief calls and uneasy meetings. In interviews, they still appeared united. In private, they struggled to agree on basics, from song choices to management. That level of tension forced Jagger to confront a question he had avoided for years. Was it worth continuing? Later in life, he described the problem clearly. He said the band had gone into a groove of going on big tours, and he was not sure sure if the routine had replaced the purpose. That single line explains the dilemma. If he stayed, he risked getting caught in a pattern that drained the excitement out of his work. If he left, he risked breaking apart something he had given his entire adult life to. By then, the Stones operated less like a tight-knit group and more like a company trying to balance competing priorities. Repairing that required new management, practical compromise, and difficult conversations. But what happens when the spotlight itself becomes heavy to carry? Jagger's next confession exposes the pressure behind the image that seemed untouchable. Number 4. He admits he struggled with the pressure of fame far more than he showed. Mick Jagger's image has always suggested total control, the kind of confidence that never cracks even under blinding lights. For years, people saw the swagger and assumed it reflected the person behind it. Only recently has he admitted that the reality was more complicated. The ease he showed on stage hid a steady sense of pressure, loneliness, and the fatigue of living in front of millions. What looked like effortless confidence was often a shield, something he relied on because showing strain did not feel possible in the world he worked in. His path from Dartford to international fame explains why that pressure grew the way it did. Everything changed quickly, and once it began, it never slowed. In later interviews, he talked about the constant feeling of being observed, not just performing songs, but performing a version of himself that people expected. That level of scrutiny shapes how a person moves, speaks, and thinks. He said he missed people like Charlie Watts, not only as bandmates, but as steady figures in a life where normal connection was rare. He made it clear that constant touring, endless travel, and shifting cities left him with stretches of isolation that success could not soften. The spotlight can hide many things. Even when fans saw confidence and control, the reality of life on the road was far more draining. How much did constant travel cost him emotionally? Number 3. He says he hid the emotional toll of constant touring. For most of his career, Mick Jagger looked like someone built for the road. The strut, the control, the way he powered through each show without showing a crack all suggested ease. Only later did he admit that the confidence people saw was often a way of keeping himself steady. He did not talk about the small things he lost along the way, the birthdays he missed, the family routines that slipped away, the days that blurred into airports and hotel rooms. In private, he described touring as giving him a very intense relationship with the audience, a quick burst of excitement that covered a quieter sense of emptiness. He was young when global fame arrived, and the speed of it shaped everything. Schedules were locked months ahead, and before he could slow down, the road had set his habits and expectations. In later interviews, he talked about finishing shows, stepping into a dressing room, and watching the crew pack up. In those moments, the noise faded, and he felt what the pace had taken from him. Touring replaces normal life without you noticing, and normal life is where relationships grow. In a recent conversation, he said, "If you are working and always away, you do not get to enjoy it quite as much." The routine made the message clearer. Land in a new city, soundcheck, perform, sleep, fly again. There was no time to settle, no space to connect with the people waiting for him at home. One image he often returns to is the moment after a show when he sat alone in a dressing room, the applause fading through the walls while the stage was dismantled. In his 20s, he treated that pause like a reward. With age, he saw how easily it could feel hollow. He explains this without asking for sympathy. He is laying out cause and effect when he says the road is a very exciting couple of hours and it is a very intense relationship with the audience. He follows it with the truth he avoided for years. Non-stop travel comes at the cost of stability and normal life. The industry rewards performers who seem invulnerable, and admitting strain did not fit the image that kept the Stones moving. Now he talks about it as a fact, the part of the job that never appeared in the spotlight. Surviving life on the road is one challenge. Coming home to family is another. Jagger admits that stepping into fatherhood was not as simple as it looked, and the next confession shows how unprepared he felt. Number 2, he feared fatherhood at first. Mick Jagger's image as the eternal bachelor never matched the reality of his life as a father to 8 children. The contrast becomes sharper when you hear him explain how unprepared he felt at the start. He did not step into fatherhood with ease or confidence. In later interviews, he admitted that coming home after long stretches on the road left him out of sync with his family, saying that parenting is not like riding a bike. He was not pretending to be helpless. He was acknowledging that touring left him unsure how to settle into the quieter work of raising a child. What makes this striking is that he never spoke about these feelings when he was younger. His children span generations. He became a father early in his career, then again at stages of life when most people have already settled. Each time the circumstances were different, but the conflict stayed the same. His job required constant movement. Parenting required stillness. In his own words, if you are working and always away, you do not get to enjoy it quite as much. He was not worried about public judgment. He was worried about missing the moments at home while chasing deadlines, flights, and shows. Picture the early version of that fear. A baby at home, Jagger packing a suitcase before sunrise, and a partner watching the routine with quiet frustration. When he later joked about being out of practice, he was admitting that parenting is something you have to live inside, not visit between tour legs. The pandemic confirmed that. When touring stopped, he suddenly had uninterrupted time with his young son Devereaux, and that stillness showed him what he had missed in earlier years. The long-term effect is clear. His older children grew up with a father who was famous and often away. That distance shaped their childhoods, and it shaped the way Jagger now talks about himself. He does not frame the past as a dramatic confession. He describes a pattern he took years to understand. Parenting is a practice, and he spent much of his life missing it because the job he chose kept him moving. The lesson he shares now is simple. Being present matters, and when you are not there, the distance does not stay small. Parenting, touring, and fame all ask something of him, but what happens when the weight of those demands begins to add up? Jagger's final revelation is not about drama or gossip. It is the truth he carries to this day. Number 1, he finally revealed his deepest regret about the life he lived. What Mick Jagger calls his deepest regret is not a scandal, it is a moral ledger. After decades of constant motion, he has said something simple and steady. The biggest cost of his career was the emotional distance it created. He has put that cost in plain terms, choosing work over connection, movement over stillness, and only late in life did he fully name the weight of that choice. This is not showmanship. It is a careful admission from someone who has lived a long public life and can now see what success required. He frames the confession with clarity and restraint. He does not dramatize it. He says he missed ordinary things. He speaks about friends who are gone and about a family life that was always being rescheduled. The quote that signals the confession is straightforward. Over the course of my life, I have sacrificed love, private life, and time for me, all on the altar of work. He pairs that with practical observations about touring and fatherhood, turning them into a single admission about trade-offs. One scene brings the truth into focus. A late-night conversation with a child asking for time, a father choosing between a studio session and dinner, and the small repeated answer that becomes habit. That image is the moral turning point. Naming it carries consequences. He no longer presents life as a series of victories. He presents it as a set of choices with costs. The shift does not undo the past. It reframes it. It forces the listener to view success not only as achievement, but as exchange. The final note is quiet, a survivor accounting for what the road required and admitting that, for all the applause, the deepest price was the slow drift from connection to performance.